It is 5:30. Welcome to our board meeting. It is the 13th of January, 2022, and we are meeting in the boardroom on Legacy Campus. We will start with roll call.
Randall Bagley, board member.
Steve Norton, superintendent.
Roger Pulsford, board member.
Terry Rhodes, board member.
Kathy Christiansen, board member.
Jared Black, business administrator.
And Jeff Nielsen, Chris Corcoran, and Larry Jepson, board members, are excused. We will now move to the pledge and mission statement. Steve Norton will lead us in the pledge. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Cache County mission statement is, our mission is to educate students for success in a changing world.
Thank you, Superintendent. And seeing that we have no public input, we will move to our action agenda. First up is the request for approval of the Ridgeline High School student club called Subtitles. And Deanna's not here, but she already presented. Does anyone have any questions, or are you all okay to move ahead with this?
I'm okay.
So I will take a motion to approve the request for the Ridgeline High School Student Club Subtitles.
I move that we approve the Ridgeline High School Student Club subtitles.
Second.
There is a motion to approve the Ridgeline High School Student Club subtitles and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will vote.
The voting is closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The request for the approval of the Ridgeline High School Student Club subtitles has been approved, and they can move forward with the activities of that club. Second, we have a request for the approval of the Skyview High School School Land Trust Plan Amendment. And this says it will be presented by Principal Mike Lichty. That takes you back a ways, doesn't it?
Well, we have presented that already. These proposal was to move the $25,000 of parapros to the technology budget, the $6,500. So that's his request.
Okay. Anyone have questions? I'll take a motion then.
I make a motion to approve the Skyview High School's Land Trust Plan Amendment.
Second.
There is a motion to approve the Skyview High School School Land Trust Plan Amendment and a second. Is there any discussion? Concerns? Seeing none, we will vote.
Voting is closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. We will, the vote to approve the Skyview High School School Land Trust Plan Amendment has passed. They are welcome to move forward with the changes that they requested. Now we have a request for approval for retirement of policies.
Kim asked me to cover that one, and this is one we talked before about the the specific policy about the employee activity passes. We have one for both certified and classified, and they're just policies we don't need anymore. We have the guidelines set in place, and the employees know how they get those.
Okay, I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the retirement of the employee activity passes policy.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the retirement of policies for employee activity passes. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote.
Voting is closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Can I just make a brief comment? Since that's no longer going to be in policy, and you as board members will change, and this position will change in the future, that policy was put into effect as a way to show our people who work for us, our employees, how much we appreciate the time and effort that goes into being a part of this organization, and we were going to let them go and be a participant for all the activities that we have in our district that take place. I'm packing in my wallet a card from the Chandler School District in Arizona that allows all grandparents to come and visit all, and they give those to all grandparents who want them. And their district is just a little larger than ours. And I talked to their superintendent, and Arizona's a whole different population than we have here. They have a whole lot of grandparents who live in Arizona. And they just thought it was probably one of the best PR things they could do. So when bond issue time came up, those grandparents had been in our schools and had the opportunity. I floated that idea here. The balloon didn't go very high because our schools are so stressed for money. And so we use gate receipts to help our high schools function. But please don't forget that there are some things that we just do because they're good practice. And I'd hate to see that ever go away. So, yeah.
Well, we're retiring the policy because the passes as they used to be printed are no longer used, but employees still have access, right?
They do, yeah. And it's a nice system once they get used to it. It was really easy just to pull that pass out and go on in. But I just tell you that because somewhere down the road somebody will say, why are we doing that when our schools are so strapped? And, most of our patrons, if you looked at, they don't go to very many of our events. The people who are involved with their kids are playing in basketball or athletics or band or drama. But there aren't a whole lot of people. But if they have the energy to get up off their couch and come out to one of our schools, I think they ought to be able to come in and watch what's going on. Now, I'll fade off in the past and just be a picture up there someday, but I just want you to keep it in mind. So why we're doing it, yeah.
Okay. Next on our action agenda is request for approval of the surplus Richmond property, the Richmond property, close to North Cache, and this will be presented by Scott Rigby.
Hello, good evening. I'm just coming to request a vote for the proposal that I made several weeks ago for our opportunity to surplus the Richmond property land that is next to the school to the south. Any further questions or discussion?
No, just that I was at North Cache sometime in the last week for a PTA meeting, and it's just assumed that apparently it's just a known fact that who the buyer is.
Well, who one of the people that are interested?
It's going out to everyone. It's going out into the newspaper, onto Utah Legals, and so
Right.
everyone will have an opportunity to bid on that.
That's what I thought was interesting. I said, wow, you guys all know who the buyer is? I haven't even heard yet.
Well,
We haven't even put it out.
I read somewhere what they're building. Would that have been in the newspaper? I don't know, somewhere I heard they're putting apartments there.
I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
No, not apartments.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I
okay.
got bad information.
So, good, I'm glad whatever sources are out there, it's going out to public auction.
Yes.
Right. That's what I told the PTA moms and one of the administrators, that as far as I knew, it was just going out to public bid.
Correct. Yes, that is correct. Anyone and everyone will have an opportunity to bid on that if they would like.
All right. Does anyone else have questions before we move on this? Okay, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to approve of the surplus Richmond property.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the surplus of Richmond property, and seconded. And any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote.
Voting is closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott.
Thank
you.
you.
Can now send it out to public bid.
I've already got it ready to go, so
Awesome.
thank you.
Thanks. We're moving into our reports agenda, and this first item will be presented by Robin Clement, which is our federal time and effort requirements by ESSA.
Yeah, so part of what we need to do to meet the requirements of the ESSA program is to make sure that we have a policy that goes over time and effort, which is a policy that covers employees that are paid with any ESSA funds. It's generated through Munis, pops out biannually, employees sign it, and we keep a record. We just need a policy that says we do that. So.
Okay. And who's writing that policy?
I am, and I don't know if it's not in your board. It I'm sorry. Well, it just simply states, to meet the federal requirements of ESSA, Cache County School District will maintain time and effort records semi-annually for employees being paid with ESSA funds. And then we'll link that back to the fiscal handbook from the state, because they update this quite regularly.
I only have one request, and that is that the first time that you see the acronym ESSA, that you spell out all the words.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Usually Jenda has been wonderful to catch that, but she's out right now, so.
Yeah, it's just helpful if anybody chooses to read the policy
You are
who
right.
isn't aware.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Robin. Next on our reports agenda, we have Principal Glenn Harris from Wellsville Elementary requesting a school land trust amendment for Wellsville Elementary.
Thank you. Good evening. Yes, we propose that we make an amendment to our trust lands plan. Our trust lands plan this year, we had some money set aside to take 10 teachers to a conference for training, but because of COVID, we kind of waited as long as we could to see if they're going to change their mind, but they did not hold their conference in person. We want to go to that in person if we can. So that means we have some money that did not get spent, $9,700 or $9,725, in the same goals that we had that we were going to use the training for, goals 2 and 3. We also have some action items in there about replacing some old technology and increasing some technology access to our students. And so we'd just like to take that money and put over into those categories so we can increase that. We'd like to shift $7,000 of that over for technology needs, $1,500 to help us with some materials for our Tier 2 reading instruction, and then the remainder of that, which is about almost $1,300, just over into our parapro money that we'll use there. So we're really not adding anything. We're just shifting funds over to some other categories, to some areas that we can use those funds for this year.
Thank you for coming. It's I personally appreciate all the principals who get on this really quickly to move that funding to places where they can use it when they find out they can't use it where they had intended. Nice work. I have a question though. So the majority of the money that you're moving is going into technology, and I'm just curious, is there a preference these days between short throw projectors and the flat screen TVs?
That's a good question. Mostly the technology department has got some new short throw projectors that are actually used a laser. They don't have a bulb. They last longer. They're brighter. So we use those mostly, and that's mostly what we're replacing, but there's a few areas that it's a little bit more beneficial for us to use a monitor. So we're actually going to use money for both some short throws and a few monitors. So it just kind of depends on your situation. And our library, for instance, it was better to use a monitor. It was large, it was clear. They could see it throughout the room. But in the side of classroom, where they're throwing that on a whiteboard, where teachers use that for their instruction, it's better to have a short throw.
Great, thanks for answering that
You're welcome.
question for me. Anybody else have any questions for Principal Harris? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next on our reports agenda is Principal Audrey McHale from Lincoln Elementary with a request to amend their school land trust plan.
Good afternoon. I would like to make the proposal for an amendment to our trust lands plan, moving an allocated budget from teacher salary into 3 different categories, the first being employee training and development. We would like to take 10 educators to a Solution Tree conference that is being held in person this March. I'd also like to put some money into a book that promotes PLCing by the Solution Tree Company, who was written by Do4 and Mike Meadows, and to move some money into technology as well, to be used similarly to Glenn's, updating teacher equipment, student equipment, Chromebooks, and the like. Do you have any questions?
Anyone?
Looks good.
So how come you guys get to go to a conference in person and Wellsville doesn't?
Things have been going in waves. You know, things are in person and then they're not. And right now, this one is in person and we want to jump on it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
See you next month.
Oh, man.
That's the world we live in right now.
Yeah, it is. Okay, the next item on our reports agenda is an equity update by Alden Jack, who must be working the day shift and the night shift to get all this done.
Well, thank you for letting me come visit the meeting this evening. I have taken on that title as the Director of Equity and Inclusion for the school district, and that's a humbling thing for me. But it's also something that I'm passionate about, and appreciate that Superintendent Norton's taken quick action to help us have someone who can direct those efforts for the school district. You have probably seen, but the state has given additional guidance for educational equity for schools in R277328. And there are several items in there that are intended to guide our efforts. But also, I think one of the most important things we can do right now is listen to our community. And a primary interest, we want to know what the experience is of our school patrons. Especially, I think we need to listen to the voice of our students and what they're saying about their experience at school. It's been interesting for me to begin a listening tour. I have visited our Ridgeline High School. They have a diversity discovery class, and some very impressive youth in that who make up that class. And I appreciated being able to sit and listen with them and ask them questions and hear a little bit about what's working really well for them at Ridgeline. And to also listen to them about what they want our schools to become and what can we do to improve. And I think that that's been very rewarding for me to listen. What I have here for you, I believe it was in your notes there, started looking at how can I help to make a plan for progress in our school district that addresses the items that the state is asking schools to be attentive to, but also how can we do this in a way that helps us to listen to the community and unite our community in the effort of making school accessible to all students. And especially, we are thinking about accessibility for students who may be marginalized or minoritized. And so I've listed here some action steps that I'd like to share with you tonight. The first part of this document gives the definition we've been provided with by the state on educational equity, and I would argue that this is one of the most important pieces we can take from state guidance at this time to look at how we can direct this effort in the schools. I'll just read part of that. Educational equity means acknowledging that all students are capable of learning and distributing resources to provide equal opportunities based upon the needs of each individual student. The next piece there in their definition talks about equitable resources, which means that we pay attention to funding, program, policy, initiatives, and supports that recognize each student's unique background and school context to guarantee that all students have access to high-quality education. The next thing I've done there is added some language. One piece of that you'll recognize as being part of our mission statement. Our mission is to educate students for success in a changing world. So for us to do that, that means a commitment to ensuring educational equity for all of our students in our cash schools. Another piece there that I'll read, we believe that all students can learn and achieve at high levels if provided sufficient, appropriate opportunities to develop skills as a result of effective teaching. The last piece I'll read there is that all school personnel share a responsibility for maintaining a safe learning environment. And one of our best tools for doing that is using effective instructional practices. The next piece here is outlining what I've been calling our big rocks, several focus areas that we know we'd like to begin taking action immediately. And one of those first items is to form a district committee. We had an initial meeting with some committee members on Monday to discuss these big rocks, and I'd like to share those with you tonight. The first big, and these are not in any prioritized order here. In fact, I would say that one of the most important ones happens to be on the bottom. So just realize that I think that they all are very important big rocks. One of the first big rock areas is professional learning. Again, with the state's R277328 on educational equity in schools, it outlines 10 items for professional training for teachers. And it references professional learning standards, the board's resolution on denouncing racism and embracing equity in schools, and the portrait of a graduate. We know that we have educators who want to better understand equity and inclusion. They want to better understand how they can make their classroom a safe space for all students. And they're asking questions about how do I handle instruction and make discussions appropriate for students. And so all of that falls under this category of professional learning. We know that this is something that is an ongoing effort. It's not a one-time thing. And so paying attention to that professional learning and listening to our teachers about the things that they need to better meet their students' needs. Another big rock area is our student support systems. Primarily this happens in the classroom with the teacher and also in teacher teams, our professional learning communities. We are charged with identifying students when they're underperforming in any way. And there could be many reasons why a student may not be fully accessing school. And in particular, we're interested in knowing what might happen for a student who is minoritized and what might be causing them to not fully be able to access school. So we're needing to be attentive to academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs. So our student support systems are an important part of that. And how can we focus on learning and remove barriers that will allow all students to access learning? So I think that this includes our work in PLCs and teacher teams, but it also includes the structures that we have set up to review our data, to have discussions and conversations about students who need support. It may include things like climate surveys and other tools to help us take a look at what's happening in our schools and how can we support the schools. Another big rock item, a reporting system. We have current reporting structures for taking note of incidents, severe behavior, concerns for allegations of harassment and bullying. But we want to be sure that we are taking another step in clarifying those procedures for school administrators and teachers, and that we are being very attentive to those kinds of items as they come up. We want to know that as concerns are raised, are we careful to take action and take note of those actions and share those actions with those who need to know. Another reporting system that we feel is important is a way to verify when we've received concerns through district office personnel, that we have taken note of those concerns and been sure to follow through in a consistent and timely manner as a district office staff. Curriculum and instruction is another. All of these are kind of broad umbrella categories of the kind of work that we need to do. In curriculum and instruction, we need to implement principles and strategies of inclusion and equity. We need to help our teachers remain impartial in classroom discussions, in the materials we select and the instruction we provide. And there are several safeguards that have been identified by the state and that we need to be attentive to, that we are ensuring that the content used is age appropriate and that it's been previewed and vetted before it's used with students, and that we provide transparency to the community about the instruction we give. Another key item that we want to be attentive to is reviewing policy. We want to look at the language and the structure of our policy and make sure that it reflects the educational equity efforts that we need to make. We also want to be sure that it's in alignment with state and federal law and supportive of our commitment to address educational equity for our schools and our community. And last but not least, and again in many ways I believe this is the most important, we know that we need to develop partnerships with diverse community members, organizations, groups, stakeholders who can help inform our equity and inclusion efforts. One of the first things that I plan to do is hold some focus groups where we can bring in student groups, parent groups, staff member groups, and community partners. And just to be able to listen about their experience in our schools and use that as a way to help us inform our efforts that we make. I think that and something to note here is that all of these items are long-term change items, and we make change with building good relationships with people. And we don't want this to be a flash in the pan or some kind of a sprint effort. We want this to be a long-term growth effort for our schools. I wonder if you have any comment or questions about any of the big rocks that I've shared tonight.
I have 3 questions.
Okay.
Do you have teachers on your district committee?
We have a district committee right now that's what I would say bare bones committee with district leadership. We know that many of these big rock items will require subcommittee, task force type groups. And I anticipate that we'll need to involve teachers on many of these big rock items on those task committee type items.
Okay. The second one, are you planning to put any members of the board on your district committee?
Right now, yeah, you're welcome to join. Again, right now, we've got kind of a bare bones committee, and one of the big rock items that I can see that is going to be essential for board support, especially as we look at policy review and as we look at building community partnerships and gathering stakeholder feedback.
And then the third question, you probably don't have an answer for this yet, but it seems like teachers right now have got a ton of stuff on their plates to do.
They do.
In fact, as I'm getting into the schools, I'm hearing this year is harder than last year, and they're just overwhelmed and going home crying and coming in on weekends. So I guess this isn't really a question. It's just kind of a thought to try and figure this all out without making it more work or much more work for teachers. And I don't even know if that's possible, but I think it's a big consideration.
It's absolutely an important concern, and you notice all of these items include teachers and the training and understanding that we go through to help them be able to respond as our first line of defense in the classrooms. So I believe that's something that will be discussed next when we talk about school calendar. But I know that one item that came up in our initial equity committee meeting this last Monday was that very topic of how do we help provide the time and support that our educators will need to begin taking on these items that we've just addressed. So valid concern and much appreciated.
Well, I think it's great how you've got it set up, and you've put a lot of thought, and it's very professional, and it sounds really great. So thanks for doing all of that groundwork. But those are just a few concerns that I have, is that how much more can teachers do?
Yeah, I hear you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions? All right. Thank you for coming.
Okay.
Big thank you. Thank you.
Next we have, we did discuss the school calendar recommendation in our last meeting, but there have been some new developments, and so Mike Lichty will be presenting those this evening.
So we did have this as an action item for tonight, and we've moved it back to the discussion because of some recent things that Superintendent made us aware of at a recent meeting he was at. Superintendents were asking just that question, Kathy, with everything coming down, how are we providing time for our teachers to do this while they're on contract? And the first bit of information that came back to the superintendents were, are you fully taking advantage of the 4 days that were allocated a couple of years ago to school districts that they could use for professional development or PD or prep. Those are the two categories. And Cache District has not been doing that. I put a copy of the law. It's attached in there because I wanted you to see the reference on where it allows us to use 4 days out of the 180 days. So what it really means is our students end up having 4 less days of instruction. And the calendar that we're proposing tonight will include now these 4 days, adding 2 more days into the calendar to help with teachers, be it professional development or prep, based on whatever it's coming from the state and the training that's needed that way. Another part on that first page on the law says the board here has to approve this, and we have to get these changes out to our patrons within 90 days so they know what the next year is going to look like, so if we're taking any of these days. So if you actually go to the calendar that is proposed there, and I did have a chance, we had a Google Meet Tuesday night, I believe, with the calendar committee, and went over the proposal for them on adding 2 more days. And if you look here at the calendar, I've numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the actual 4 days that we would still count as instruction, but we're using them for prep or PD. This year we're using 2 of those days for the transition day between trimesters. And the teachers and principals have been very appreciative of that. That's worked very well. And Gary's been able to do something with elementary teachers on that same time. So we're adding the other 2 days into the calendar. That's what we're proposing. And so if you have any questions, I guess I'm ready to answer them.
So as I look at this calendar, there really are 5, 6 professional development days. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so are we paying for the other 3 besides the 4?
Yes. Those other 3 are not part of the teacher. Yes, they are part of the contract, but they're not part of the 180 days. It extends our calendar. One is in August, and then we've added the other 2 PD days. Teachers have always had those days. Mm-hmm. This last year, we actually added it to their contract, those days. So they have 7 altogether now with these other 4.
So last time I asked about why our district wasn't utilizing all 4 of these allowed PD days during the 180. I was told that it was because we felt like student instruction was so much more important. So has that changed?
It's changed. We have to pick a priority here, and right now there is a lot of pressure on our teachers right now. And if you look at where we place these 2 additional days, very strategic and on purpose, where we set them, one in December, and then the other one, the number 3 that we placed and made a longer weekend for parents and students on that. So sometimes those end up being a bit of a wasted day, especially the one in December. And our teachers appreciated where we were proposing these days in the calendar for them. So, it's a question of, do we value instruction more, or can we give our teachers some relief? And I think the board can always take these back. If something calms down, things calm down, and we want to bring back 2 of these days into instruction, the board can always do that. We just have to give the notice.
I could just add to that. The first module of the training for equity is 2 hours. Have you got, okay, I thought 4, you got 5, 3, but there are more modules coming, and this is required training. It's not that we can just say that we're not going to do it. We just got to the point where we said, okay, this we've got to do something different than what we've done, and it's hard for us to go to the legislature and ask for more of these type of days when we're not taking advantage of the ones that we already had that we could. And so we thought now's the right time. We'll reevaluate it every year. And there was a time when I first came to this district, we had 9 career ladder days. And you could look at this and say, well, we're gradually building back up, but those were days that were additional days beyond the contract. The teachers had to do a lot of the things that we're talking about now. And so I am making the recommendation that we set aside these instructional days for a period of time at least to help our teachers with pressure that they're feeling out there and provide paid time for training instead of expecting them to go home and go on Canvas and go through a module of training.
Oh, I'm in agreement. I was in agreement years ago.
Yeah.
And I think I am too. Career Ladder Days, and Kathy will second it, they were great when we had them.
Yeah.
And using December 21st, I see that as a no-brainer because that's not a very good instructional day for students. So
Yeah.
There is the 19th or the 20th, in case you need 2 more.
We could take more off if the state would let us.
But part of the reason that the Christmas break was cut back was for this calendar. We were told last discussion was for the classified employees.
It was because the 2-week break.
So will they still be working on the 21st?
Yeah, they'll be in training just like everybody else.
All right.
Yeah. I talked to Wayne Reese with the busing and transportation, and he knows he has to prepare some training for them as well. So food service, they all need, all this training that's coming down, it's going to be for all district employees on this.
Great.
Okay.
So we'll come back next time and ask for approval of the calendar.
Does that give you the 90 days or whatever that
Yes.
you need? Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's just 90 days before school starts again.
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Next on the reports agenda is board member reports. So first we'll hear from Kathy about the Smithfield Rec Center.
Okay, so we had another meeting with the rec center, and Jared did present a budget, and we're in good shape. There's over $300,000 there in case of any emergencies that may come up, things that need to be done. And the committee for the rec center approved them spending $55,000 to replace a bunch of equipment that's breaking and dangerous. So that was one of the things that changed that we did. The second thing, it was awesome to have Bruce there, because after he gave the information about how expensive building is right now, the whole problem of we would like the district to buy us out and the city will build a new building, or we would like to add 2 more rooms onto this one, just kind of went away. So we are good to go.
Okay. If it comes up again, we'll discuss it at that time, but it's not a good time for anybody to be looking about breaking off from an agreement that's worked well for years.
And actually, the folks from the rec center and Skyview felt like that they could work it all out, too. So
Great. Next on board member reports is our USBA conference reports. And Jared, you're first. Can you type and talk?
I'll just have to remember what I said. Hopefully I can. Well, it's nice to go first because then I don't have to
That's right.
repeat what others have said. Okay. The USBA conference is held each January down in Salt Lake, and it's a neat opportunity for the school board and superintendents and business administrators to get together. I've always enjoyed going to that. For me, one of the highlights is always the opportunity to get together with other business administrators and just see what they're thinking about issues and how they're handling different issues. For example, school fees is such a big deal right now throughout the state, trying to comply with all the requirements for school fees. And it's just great to get together and see what others are doing. And if nothing else, know that everybody else has the same struggle in a way that can help you feel a little bit better. But we have a business administrators meeting Thursday prior to that conference starting, and we were able to go through a lot of legislative items coming up and kind of get everybody on the same page. So that was valuable to me. I really enjoyed one of the keynote speakers whose topic was on the importance of trust. That is a topic I wholeheartedly believe in, and so it was great to hear that message. I enjoyed that. A couple of the breakout sessions that I enjoy, the legal update is always fascinating. Patrick Tanner presented that this year, and he reviews different cases that are happening around the country that affect legal positions or how things might be coming for school districts and school boards, and I just think that's fascinating. There was another breakout session with a gentleman, I forget his name, I think it might have been Stewart, but he's a vice president at Southern Utah University. But it was about resilience and mental and emotional health, and it was actually, he gave a similar presentation to the superintendents last year, because I was at that one down in St. George, but one of the things that he does is he hands out a survey to everybody with different questions about challenging life events you may have experienced. You know, have you been through a divorce, or have you lost a parent or a child, or have you experienced depression and anxiety, or, you know, things like that. And then everyone anonymously fills that out and turns it in, and then you end up getting somebody else's, and he goes through each of those questions, and you stand up kind of for that person if they marked that. And it's very eye-opening to see how many difficult things everyone around us has experienced and been through. It's helpful just to have that understanding that we're not alone in that regard, and I enjoyed that presentation. For me, just being new to the district, it's also very helpful anytime we can spend time together as a board and superintendent and business administrator, just to build that camaraderie and that trust. So I really enjoyed the conversations and the laughter and all of those kinds of things.
Don't forget the sadness that we didn't all win any prizes, except for
Randall won.
Yep.
Yeah, superintendent explained his process for putting his ballot in to win, and it hasn't been successful for a long time. So
Ever.
tried to suggest it's time for a change.
No. There were years when I was on a real hot streak, and that was when
years ago.
the gal had to reach up and couldn't see inside the barrel and put her hand in and just did it by touch. Now they look into the barrel and they pull out all the flat ones instead of the ones that have a airplane and wings and all. Yeah, that's the change.
For those of you who don't know, at this conference, every school district donates a door prize. And at the beginning of each general session, which there are 5, but they draw names out for the for those gifts, to award those gifts, and you have to be present to win. So there are a lot of groans toward the end of the conference when so-and-so is not here. So anyway, the superintendent was highly displeased with all of us being very unlucky. Kathy?
Okay. The two workshops that I really enjoyed was the one Safety in School and Board Meetings. It was under the direction of Davis School District. And then the Cook Center for Human Connection, which I'm not going to make any comments on this, but I have given the information to Steve so he can get it to Kurt to see if our district has any interest in seeing if this. It's a program that provides education confidentially to parents in helping their children with various issues like, let me see what some other topics were. The LGBTQ plus suicide, bullying, abuse, and then I think there's one other one. But it looked like a really great program. Excuse me a second. But the one I wanted to talk about was the Davis School. And they had 4 people presenting this one, their superintendent, assistant superintendent, the board president, and their security person. And they have done a few things in their district to help make their buildings more secure. They have secured vestibules in every school, and now everyone who comes in has to show an ID and be buzzed in. And I don't know if that ever would be feasible for us, but I thought it was great that they were able to do that.
We've talked about that and are trying to work it in to funding. Yeah.
They also had an interesting thing going on in their office, and that is that they have a room where there are 8 TVs set up monitoring, and people in there monitoring social media every single day. So they know exactly what's going on in the social media of all of these groups who are against or for or whatever. And that kind of helps them as they prepare for their board meeting. And then the rest of these are things that they have done since they had the really traumatic board meeting several months ago. They put barriers between the board and the room, and it was just kind of tables without chairs, close up to the board where no one could get right at the board. The people who are going to present at the agenda, they have assigned seats for them up at the front of the room. If they know that large groups of people are coming for protesting, they try to break up those groups of people by having district personnel come in and sit between them so they can't really have the mob mentality. They lock all of the rooms in their building before and during board meetings so people can't come and get extra chairs because they just put a limited number of chairs out at their board meetings. And they have them numbered, and as people come into the meeting who are in these groups that are really upset, they assign them a seat where they can sit. They have a plainclothes security person who is out in the foyer, who's watching for people who might cause a problem and are trying to greet them and reduce any kind of mob mentality and dehumanization. They talk to those people who come in who seem angry, using a lot of positive communication. They check their face to notice the mood, the chest to see if there's a ridgeline for a bulletproof vest, the waist area in case they're carrying a weapon. And the security guy said it was pretty easy to spot. This would be for him, who's had a lot of experience, because people who are carrying weapons are always checking with their elbow to see if their gun is still holstered. And I can't remember what it was if it's under their arm. Can any of you remember what the motion was that happens when they have it under their arm? Okay. And then they also have a armed security guard at each of their meetings. They kind of, you can help me on this one, but I think they limit how many people can actually comment during the public input, but they have comment cards. So if anybody else wants to write a comment card, they can write it and present it to the board, and then the board can get back with them or the district officers. And then they follow through with trespass notices for people who are disruptive and problematic. right now, the board president says that they have 4 or 5 that are going to be going to court over their behavior, and they have countersued, and he has $9 million worth of damage being filed against him right now in response to the trespass notices. And then the other thing that the board member said was that the board member just has to be really firm in managing the civility of the people at the meetings and not let little things get by, but close it down immediately. And kind of their slogan is board meetings are public meetings, not meetings for the public. And they try to let the public know that before their public input. That's it.
Thank you. It was surprising to me how many of my school board friends on the Wasatch Front, how many of those boards have law enforcement at their meetings. It just does matter, of course. It's just part of their meeting. They assume he'll be there. I went to the data once. I feel like our board should get more involved in data. So I went to Auditor Dougal's presentation, and his senior research analyst married a Skyview graduate. So at auditor.utah.gov, we can go to the Project Kids tab and find all kinds of data that they have taken, or that they have harvested from the Utah School Board data that the schools turn in. And I found that very fascinating to me, and I shared that. I shared that with a vice principal at one of our high schools this week, and I was showing him about how this works and how you can compare school to school and district to district and that type of thing. And I said something about Dougal, and he said, "Well, is that what this software is called? And is the state going to buy this software and so we can use it?" And I'm trying to explain to him that it's on the state auditor's website. And I said, Frugal Dougal? And he said, "Oh, is that the whole name for the software?" I said, I obviously live in a different world than you. Because we all we're in our world know who Frugal Dougal is. But it was an interesting breakout because the tension was very high in the room to begin with. There was a lot of perceived animosity with his presentation. So he was very wise and had his cute senior research analyst do all the presenting, and he just was there as support. And as she explained the usefulness of this of this data project and the tools available to us and any principals or any teachers, the tension in the room just dissipated. And I think it really is useful. And I wonder, how can our board support and celebrate schools and teachers more who are using data and PLCs well? I also went to the...
Let me just ask you a question. Did you get to the point, or did it come out any time in the meeting, who was doing well with the least amount of money spent? Because that was the intent of going into his...
You'd have to go to the site to look, but there are lots of reports. Like, I went in to look at...
Did he bring that out?
That's the whole purpose.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the x-axis on every one of his scatter plots is the x-axis is always dollars spent per student. And then the y-axis is always some type of performance. So like ACT scores, Acadian scores, things like that. And I found it, so while I was in the breakout, I was madly looking up schools in our district and with peer school, because you can compare them to peer schools, or you can just compare all the schools within an LEA, and understanding that that cost per student is variable based on a lot of things, like transportation, like
Teacher salaries.
add-ins for special ed and for at-risk students and teacher salaries and those types of things. They've really done a good job, I think, of breaking it down, understanding that none of it is exactly right, because everyone, I assume, every school reports it a little bit differently. Just like I've heard Alden talk about how some elementaries have 75 behaviors reported since the beginning of school, and some have 2. And it's partly what they're reporting. And so anyway, it was a very fascinating look for me at this at these tools, but I really
You been on that site before? Because
I've seen it before, but I haven't manipulated it myself before.
I'm just wondering if and Tim, I don't know if you've been on it lately or not. I found it. Here we go with Mr. Technology again. I found it a very difficult site when it first came up. It wasn't user friendly, and it was, and I was digging for information that I wanted about our school district, and it took me a while to find it. So I'm just hoping that they've kind of tried to make it more user friendly, because there's a whole lot of data there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get lost in just a very few minutes, and just kind of, because it just I mean, there's so much there.
There is.
Yeah.
I think it's fabulous.
Yeah.
But I also learned that there's the data available to the public, and there's the data available only to the LEA, and that there are certain people authorized in the LEA to look at that data that drills down farther into classrooms and by teacher, which I'm glad they didn't make available to the public, but could be an interesting and very useful tool for district and principal administrator or school level administrators. But back to my question,
did you know that knowledge? Did you have that? Okay.
What's the website again?
auditor.utah.gov. And then you go to, there's down in the middle of the screen, there's a little thing that looks like a button, and it says Project Kids.
And I'm just going to throw out an idea. A vice principal, his day is full of lots of stuff. So the fact that he doesn't go to a state auditor site and look for data, we who have a little time during the day to stop and reflect, that's our responsibility to make sure that we know those resources are available, and that we get it in a capsule form that they can swallow and not feel overwhelmed and use it. So we'll do a better job of.
I was not surprised that he didn't know about it. My little moment was just saying John Dougal, and he didn't know who that was.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, wow, our rurals are very different. And I'm glad, because that means he's hyper-focused on his school, as he should be. But he was super excited to see that that data available.
We come out very, very nicely in that type of comparison.
Yes, in most cases.
Yeah.
There were some that I was like, And in fact, there was one site that he went, or one of the data screens that he went to, that Woods Cross High School was very high, performing with about the same amount of money, much higher than us, much higher than his school, compared to the amount of money, and about the same dollars spent per student. And so he used it, he almost used Dougal's exact statement, because he said, wow, I wonder what Woods Cross is doing. I need to call them up and find out what they're doing different than us, because their performance is so much higher in this one area.
Okay.
And that's how he intended for it to be used. But so my question is, how can, as a school board, how can we support and celebrate schools and teachers who are using data and PLCs really well?
I just have one comment on the one problem I have with the data. Maybe I'm filling in for Chris or Mike a little bit.
Please do.
You alluded to it. You have so many variables that make up the dollar sign on that x-axis, whether it be a school that buses their kids because they don't have, it's not a neighborhood school, or you have Title I monies coming to that school, or you have a senior staff versus young staff. If I go to Green Canyon, they hire a lot of young teachers. Their neighborhood school has more senior staff. You've got all kinds of factors like that, and so making those comparisons become somewhat meaningless because it's unfair to compare one school on that x-axis against another school when the variables aren't really what leads to student achievement. And maybe he corrects for that in the data, but that's very dangerous because then everything, when you got a hammer, everything looks like a nail when you're doing those comparisons. It's a little bit dangerous, and I think that would be our concern as a district, is that data isn't used in a way to unfairly judge schools who may be actually doing quite well given the resources they have, but because of some of those factors they don't have control over, they're put in a category.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes very difficult.
Case in point, I was principal years and years ago, 20 plus years ago, of a school who had the most veteran staff in our district. More veteran than any high school, more veteran than any middle school, the most veteran period. And so you just look at those teacher salaries, and many of those teachers had taught 25 plus years, some up to 40 years, versus a neighboring school, and that was a Title I school, had the most highest grain reduced lunch rate in the district at the time. You go to a neighboring school, a sister school, who has half of their staff in their first 5 years, or all of their staff in their first 15 years. That comparison would have really thrown our two schools off. We were spending, I'm sure, twice as much per student, just in teacher salaries alone, getting similar results, or maybe, I don't know. But that worries me just a little. There's so many variables.
I agree with that too, because even when you do the standardized testing and you have a group of students whose parents are graduates of college who are very into education, they are going to, no matter what their IQ is and how you teach, they are going to typically do better than someone who speaks two different languages, only been here for a year, you know what I'm trying to say, are not doing as well. And it's really not fair to compare. So I do have a little bit of a problem with data myself, just from my teacher experiences, because my scores differed from year to year, actually depending on who the students were in my class.
We have many other data points that we do drill down by teacher, clear down to student, in our district that we are looking at.
I just think my takeaway from the whole thing was that if you understand that the data is presented from a 40,000 foot level, then it's useful data as just a broad statement. And that I feel that in our district we should celebrate more and recognize teachers and principals who are working hard or who are working really hard with data. Because I see a lot of differences in the schools that I visit with those who, and I'm not saying that every decision should be data driven, but data is really important to see where we're weak and where we're strong and how we can improve. And so those who are working with that, and I think we should just celebrate that more in our district. Another one of the breakouts that I went to was not about keeping your boardroom safe, but trying to figure out how to have those crucial conversations. And one of the things that presenter said they do in their district is the public information officer at the beginning of every meeting, before the public input, stands up and gives 3 really great things that happened in the district since the last meeting. Just so that, talking about data or, this person got this award or this school got this, did this really great thing, or these classes succeeded with, whatever, to really create a positive atmosphere before they go into public input. And that, I just think that we ought to celebrate that more. But
with that said, we were just named the 4th operator in the state of Utah by Stat.org. I believe it's in the Cache Valley Daily today. And that is comparing us to the schools in the group above us who were charter schools with 1,000 students and several hundred students. The other one was Park City, who spends a considerably larger amount per student than we do. And we were by far the largest of those 4, which was 20,000 students. I thought it was quite impressive that our district performed that well, just according to the criteria. They were using graduation data, test scores, class size.
Teacher salaries. Average teacher salaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that we could, I guess if we ever had public care, we could really celebrate it in front of them. Right? Randall, do you want to go tonight or do you want to wait?
I could share a few things here.
Okay.
Everybody did a great job here. The 2 sessions I got the most out of, I think, was Saturday morning when the district communication expert, I forget for district, Jordan, yeah, I think so. He spoke. He did a good job. And then also Kathy, the Davis one was really good. Davis does a lot of great things, and you mentioned here one thing they do with public input before a board meeting is they make sure that they're a resident of the district. You need to be a member of the district. They also limit the amount of times an individual can speak on the same subject. They don't want the same one there every night here, so they, I think, limit it to every other month when you can talk on the same subject. Those are things we might want to look at. Terry mentioned about really bragging up the district, and I think that's something, if you could bring in a school's musical group or something and have them perform and sing, that kind of sets the tone for a positive atmosphere, and people aren't quite so angry once they hear a choir or hear something like that. The Jordan director says there's things we can do as board members, when we come here, to kind of smile and present ourselves professionally, realize that people are looking at us, that we got cameras looking at us. When people are speaking, we should, square our shoulders to them, pay attention, avoid texting or playing on the computer here. And so things like that can make a difference too. So anyway, those are just a few things we can do.
Sorry, as Steve's texting.
It was that technology desire of mine just to use some tech.
It's because you're such a high
Jared
guy.
may have been as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Randall. It was, I had a hard time focusing a lot during this conference, but yeah, everything I went to was mostly good. So my board president report is that I was at an elementary earlier this month. Oh, dang, I just can't remember when I was there, but I think it was a few weeks ago. And there was a business that wanted to donate some money for the One Book, One School that they wanted to do project at that elementary. And so whenever I'm at a meeting, they always look at me and say, so what's the rules? And so I have to pull up policy and things like that. And so I did, but I found a phrase in I found several problems with a donation policy, but that's for a different day. But I did find that we have a statement in one of our one of the parts of the donation policy that says no donations with a value of $100 or more, whether in kind, cash, or otherwise, shall be accepted by Cache County School District or any of its schools, divisions, or departments without a fully completed donation, contribution, sponsorship, volunteer form. And so I contacted Jared and I said, have you ever seen this? Because I searched all through board docs as much as I could. I couldn't find it. And he checked around and nobody knew what it was.
No, I don't know what it is.
And so he created one. He's so efficient. So he created one and sent out a notice to everyone in all the employees in the district, or principals or secretaries, whoever you send. Who did you send it to?
Yeah, principals and secretaries, and I believe I included you guys so you were aware of it.
To let them know that if someone's donating directly to a school, they need to fill out that form.
Does that include teachers?
No.
They wouldn't have to do it?
Well, it's $100 or more. So if someone's handing you $20, no, they don't have to.
No, I'm just thinking of my past experience. I spend about $1,000 a year providing stuff for my class. And
you could have your principal fill that out for you, that you donated to the school.
Is it just for tax purposes, or?
I was going to say, what is the purpose of that?
Probably at least two reasons. One is for tax purposes, it can serve as evidence of a donation. And the second would just be as an accounting protocol to have something that you're giving that person kind of as a receipt for what was donated.
I would think is the receipt would solve both of those issues. So maybe that's what we've been doing, but.
Nobody's been doing it.
I don't think teachers
Well, I
have
think
ever.
we've receipted all the money that it's ever come in. So it that wouldn't have gone on.
Anyway, so this is in policy. This is what our
Yeah.
policy says. So
So-
either we need to take that out
Right.
and ditch the form that Jared created, or they need to use the form that Jared created.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
anyway, I was just impressed that Jared was so quick with that. Thank you, Jared. The other issue that we need to discuss is I have for years wondered how it is that we're following state code that says the superintendent and business administrator may not automatically have their contracts renewed when we never vote on it. We've started doing evaluations every year, but we don't take the next step and say, okay, we've done the evaluation. I'll take a motion to renew this contract for the next year or two or whatever, and have a second and a formal vote by the board, which I think we owe to our great men here, the superintendent and the BA, and to the public to let them have that formal authorization that the public knows that we are evaluating and we are voting to renew those contracts. Anyway, and we are missing policy about hiring those two positions. Our board policy in board docs talks about that the board appoints the superintendent, but it doesn't say anything about the business administrator. So I think we need to revisit our board policy on that. And what do you think about following up our evaluations with a vote on the renewal of the contract?
I think it's probably a wise thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
So we could, Kathy and I'm going to volunteer you on the spot, sorry, could look at that policy and write up something short to that effect and then bring it back if you want.
Is that in the handbook, in our handbook, or
No.
is it, it's a district policy?
It could be either. It doesn't matter, but it's not in the handbook or the policy.
Okay.
So,
And I'm sure HR would help you.
yeah, we could visit with Kurt.
Kurt would
McRae
help
and,
you.
Have him write up something.
Yeah, have him help us write something.
Yeah.
Okay. About hiring.
Oh, that's
Great.
good.
Okay. We'll call. I'll call him and chat with him about that
You might want to give him till Monday.
when he gets home.
Yeah.
Maybe I should call him now since I'm sort of
Yeah,
jealous.
He's already heard from me today, so.
And in conclusion of my president's moment, I wasn't planning to do this, but I wanted to share this with Alden and anybody else who wants to listen. You all have heard it already, but this was the second speech that I gave in the election process last weekend. But it's a great success story about Cache County School District and equity and inclusion. So here's the speech. It goes, "Where do you start if you want to change the world?" Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world." Let me tell you about Luis. Statistically speaking, the odds were stacked against Luis succeeding in school. He arrived in Cache Valley in 7th grade with a permanent resident card, speaking almost no English. He was born in Mexico, the youngest of 10 children, but his brother convinced his parents that Luis would benefit from attending school in the U.S., so they sent him to his brother in Utah. From the time he arrived in the U.S. until he graduated high school, Luis woke up at 4:30 a.m. every day to milk cows at a dairy in Smithfield. Then he went to school. When school was done, he went back to the dairy to milk more cows until 5 p.m. Then he went home, where he lived with his brother, to study and do homework before going to bed and starting the process all over again. Luis said it was tough being away from his parents, but he was driven to succeed when he thought of what they had sacrificed for him. During his senior year, his mother died in a car accident in Mexico. He missed only 2 days of school to travel south and attend her funeral. His teachers encouraged him to take more time off if he needed, but he was convinced that his mother would want him to be working hard in school. I noticed Luis when I served as a math substitute teacher in his high school and was depressed, then impressed by his story. I have followed his career because this is where I got stuck last time. He inspires me to try a little harder, to do a little better. Luis attended USU as a Huntsman Scholar in International Business, spent time after college working in Boston, and while there volunteering as a financial literacy coach for the Latino community. He is currently in London, guiding Fortune 500 companies through global financial deals. The question I began with, where do you start if you want to change the world? is at the top of the webpage of his current employer. Fitting for Luis, who said, well, at USU, education is everything. It's the best investment you will do in your life. Sorry. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.
That's great.
And moving on to the superintendent.
Okay, I think we have two people reporting. Mike, do you want to start first? He has a report on graduation, and then Tim will talk to us.
I think that's on. A couple of months ago, we talked about graduation. There was a part of the discussion that we'd come back with guidelines to the board to consider. I talked to Terry about this the other day, and we're meeting with the high school principals again in the morning. And what they would like to do is everyone has agreed that everyone's going to USU this year to graduate. The dates are set, the times are set. And then after that, they would like to put the guidelines together to see so that they can see if what's going on with USU can work and it can accommodate what they're doing, but they just want to wait until after that time. Then we'd bring you some guidelines. Okay? That's just an update.
I just wanted to give the board a quick update on some COVID developments. If you've been following the media, you know there's a surge going on across the state with Omicron, and it definitely has impacted our district, but not as significantly as some districts down along the Wasatch Front. Just to give you a frame of reference, on the time period between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we were running about anywhere from 10 to 20 student cases per day, active cases in the district, and we're running anywhere between 70 and 100. We're at 101 right now. Some of those will drop off in the morning. Those are active cases of both students and staff. It's hit our staff a little bit harder than it has in the past, and that's causing some issues. It's an all hands on deck type environment in our schools where people are covering for each other, and we certainly appreciate our staff members who are stepping up, especially our transportation department, which has been especially hard hit and has developed some contingency plans to make sure we can continue to get students to school. Finding bus drivers in general has been very difficult, and when they get sick, that makes it even more difficult. There's a lot going on out there other than COVID. There's a lot of RSV, adult RSV, flu, colds, and we've asked people to stay home and get tested when they have those conditions. So it's causing some of that absenteeism in general. The Test to Stay program that was put in place by the state legislature, which says that a school, if it reaches 30 cases or 2% for schools of 1,500 or less, the last time I looked earlier in the week, there were 8 pages of schools who had crossed that threshold before it got to one of our schools, and probably 3 or 4 more pages after the first one of our schools. We hadn't reached the threshold, but we were getting close in one of our schools. That was putting an incredible strain on the testing. If we were to follow state statute, we would quickly exhaust the supply of tests where we need it. And we were willing to take a stand on that as a district, but the legislature and the governor stood up today and took that stand for us and suspended test to stay protocols for school districts. So while Logan was in the middle of their test to stay today, that order was suspended. It will be reviewed again in 2 weeks in the legislature, and in the meantime, for schools that approach the or that reach the threshold, they do have the option of pivoting to remote learning.
They have to have board approval for that pivot to remote learning, and it can be for 4 days, and it has to be the week of the 17th of January or the week of the 24th, and it can't extend beyond those 2 weeks. So it's basically temporary relief for schools. While we may have a school across the threshold, and if that happens, we're going to start monitoring that school with the health department, but our schools are nowhere near the levels that they're seeing in Alpine and Canyon with 150, 200 students with positive cases. And I think our top school as of this afternoon was about 25, probably a little higher than that right now because Karen's been working feverishly. If you see one of our nurses, just give them a hug. Not Karen, because she's been home for several weeks sick, but she works tirelessly from home as well. So anyway, we appreciate our staff. Do you have any questions about COVID or where the district is or your role moving forward?
Sorry, I've got one more case in point. I just looked at my dashboard, and Karen Peterson and Heidi Roller are both on there right now.
Yeah. They do this every night. They work their day job, and every night they're mitigating cases for us.
That's a better scenario. I thought you said they were down with COVID.
Oh, no, they're both on here.
Yeah.
Working. Yeah,
working,
thank you.
Updating.
Yeah. We know the best place for kids is in school. We're going to try our best to keep them in school. So we'll have a discussion when we reach the thresholds. But we're not going to automatically pull the trigger and ask you to pull that trigger unless we really, really believe that it would be for the benefit of not only the sickness but for learning that we do that. And that requires that people take places for other aides, go into classrooms, and secretaries go into classrooms, and we just kind of all pull together. But that's our goal, is to keep schools going. Transportation might be the area that might trip us up. But Wayne's come up with a wonderful plan, and we're hoping that we can ride this out and keep kids involved in school. And big shout out to our parents who are keeping kids home when they're sick. We appreciate that. And for our staff who stays home when they're sick. And that's the only way we're going to get through this. So,
Our health department had an emergency meeting tonight at 5, and they've been fantastic to work with us, and they're going to be on standby if we cross the threshold. We'll look at the data very carefully. Speaking to your point on data, we look at the epi curve, how many students, if there are activities and groups where we're seeing high number of students with COVID or staff, and when they come back and come off that. So there's a lot of things to look at from the data, because the 30 students or the whatever number you have, it has a story behind it. And you really got to dig into the data to understand that story.
Are there any people in the district who are qualified to drive buses if you needed them?
Soup, is your CDL current?
I used to be, and Tim was the first one, I think, or I don't know who was the first one, but we've all told him that we would go to afternoon and night classes to get our CDLs if we need to. But it's a harder process than it was when I got it years ago. Yeah.
Just wondering.
Yeah.
I thought maybe some of you naturally had it.
My potato truck driving experience in Idaho just doesn't cut it anymore.
Because the potatoes just stayed where you put them.
Yeah.
No, they shift when you move.
Oh, no, I lifted one off the ground 2 feet and dumped half my potatoes off the back once. Missed a gear on the way up a hill, so.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Last thing I have is I just want the public to know out there that Terry ran for vice president of USBA, and we all had the privilege. She read her second talk, but we all had the privilege of hearing her give the first talk. And as soon as she was done with that, I knew that she would win that election. It was she knocked it out of the ballpark, and she's well respected, and she's going to do a fantastic job of representing not only our district but the whole state of Utah as she goes through the progression from vice president to president, president-elect, president, and then past president. And so I have both copies of both speeches, so I think I'll get them out to everybody. They need to hear what she had to say, and congratulations. So.
Thank you. It was a little unnerving, but it was fun too. Yeah. And before we adjourn, I have to remind everyone that our meeting that was scheduled for next Thursday will be moved to the 27th instead of the 20th. And with that, we're at the end of our agenda, so we'll adjourn.